It is my honor and privilege to introduce Ms. Nadja Halilbegovich, today's commencement speaker and recipient of an honorary degree from Butler University. I know I speak for many, many members of the Butler community when I say that we are delighted to have Nadja back on campus and to celebrate a truly remarkable person and to recognize her for her good and important work promoting peace worldwide. Nadja came to Butler as a student in the fall of 1997, and she earned a bachelor's degree in music performance and theater. As you can imagine, many of us in the Jordan College of Arts have been especially excited to welcome Nadja back to campus today. In the past few months, I've had many conversations with my colleagues in JCA and across campus about Nadja. In one of these conversations, I mentioned that I had had Nadja as a student in a music theory class that I taught. The response was something like, "Oh, I bet she knew the answer to every question." In fact, Nadja was a truly outstanding academic student. I looked back at my old grade book, yes, I keep these, and I saw that Nadja had earned a score of 107% on the last project, 105% on the final exam, and 102% overall for the semester. Now, as remarkable as these numbers are, the truth is, I had forgotten about them. And the reason is this. Nadja's academic strength was not her most memorable characteristic. When I think back of a teenage Nadja Halilbegovich, what I remember is a young lady who was always exceedingly polite and always eloquent in conversation. And her interactions went well beyond surface niceties. Her well-chosen words and her manner of speaking and listening reflected a genuine kindness and caring. But even that statement doesn't really describe her well. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that in even a simple short conversation with Nadja, I always felt as if she radiated an appreciation for what it means to be human, for the value of human life, and the importance of our time on earth together. What I didn't know at that time was the sequence of events that brought Nadja to Butler. When I learned of her childhood, it made me realize that what I had always suspected about Nadja must indeed be true. That what appeared to be a deep appreciation for the beauty and dignity of human life was indeed genuine. Nadja was born in Sarajevo. In 1992, when she was 12, war broke out in Bosnia, and for the next several years, she, her family, and all the citizens of Sarajevo endured the tremendous pain and hardships brought on by the war. Nadja herself was seriously wounded when a bombshell exploded by her. To this day, she still has pieces of shrapnel in her legs. As difficult as this experience must have been, during the war, Nadja continued to write poetry, continued to study, continued to sing and to play music. And she continued to write the poignant diary entries that detailed her wartime experience and became the basis for her first book, My Childhood Under Fire. In 1995, amidst sniper fire and bomb blast, Nadja escaped Sarajevo and the war, literally through an underground tunnel. A few days later, she arrived safely in the United States. And ever since, Nadja has been working to promote peace and serving as an advocate for children victims of war. This work includes speaking to tens of thousands of people around the globe, including presentations at the Global Young Leaders Conference and the State of the World Forum. Nadja has been featured in documentaries and in books, often alongside such luminary peacemakers as Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, and the recently deceased Nelson Mandela. Perhaps most commonly, Nadja and her diary are compared to Anne Frank and her famous diary. And for this reason, Nadja is sometimes referred to as the Bosnian Anne Frank. And so it is fitting to recognize Nadja Halilbegovich today for her good work and to ask her to address today's graduates as they begin the next stage of their own good work. Nadja, would you please come forward?
On the recommendation of the faculty, the president and provost, with the approval of the Butler University Board of Trustees, and by the authority vested in me, I confer upon you, Nadja Halilbegovich, the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto. I invite the audience to join me in expressing our congratulations and best wishes to our newest honorary degree recipient.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Spaniel, for that beautiful introduction. I'm so moved. Thank you, President Denko. Thank you, Dr. Morris, Chairman Fenneman, and the Board of Trustees. This is such an enormous honor. Good afternoon, esteemed faculty, staff, and guests, proud family and friends, and above all, good afternoon and congratulations to my Butler family, my fellow Butler graduates. I am so proud and happy to be here today celebrating your amazing achievements. Now, being here at Cluse Hall, I must take a moment to acknowledge how beautifully surreal this moment is for me. Some 15 years ago, as a high school senior, I came to Butler to audition for the music department. Afterwards, I was taken on a tour of the campus and ended up here at Cluse Hall. I walked across this stage and settled in one of these rows and wondered whether I would ever get to perform here and whether Butler would become my home for the next 4 years. I was 18 years old, still with a heavy Bosnian accent. I had only been speaking English for 2 years. And although I was full of hope, I was also deeply uncertain about my future. Fortunately, I did attend Butler, and I did perform on this very stage for many joyous occasions with the Butler Choir. I even worked here as an usher, earning some spending money. So you see, to find myself on this stage again and in this awesome capacity is, I have no words except to say, beautifully surreal. I stand before you today as a 34-year-old, but sometimes I feel like I've lived a century. A childhood spent living under siege, under the constant threat of bombshells and bullets, in this relentless grip of fear and uncertainty has left an indelible mark on my mind and on my heart. I believe this mark is even deeper due to the fact that I was only a child when the war erupted in my native Bosnia-Herzegovina. Much too early, at the age of 12, I became deeply aware of the fragility of human life. And that painful, premature knowledge has been one of the most important lessons in my life, as well as a terrible burden, and sometimes a debilitating emotional trauma. I was 13 years old when one sunny, crisp October morning in 1992, I begged my mom to let me go outside. I couldn't remember the last time I was allowed outside in the fresh air. It felt like weeks. Most days, the bombings of our capital, Sarajevo, were so ruthless and intense that we had to seek refuge in dark and moldy basements, or at the very least, hide inside our apartments. On the rare occasion when dawn broke into a quiet day, it was only a matter of time until deadly crackles of snipers and deafening explosions would shatter the peace and instantly color the day with the blood of innocent civilians. So although I was pale and teary-eyed as I begged, my mom firmly resisted. But I was relentless, and I kept asking her again and again, well into the afternoon of that October day. Finally, I wore her down, and I still remember her yelling out, "Just for a few moments, all right," as I laced up my shoes and ran down the stairs. Outside, I stayed close to our apartment building, finally enjoying some warm sun and fresh air, when suddenly a powerful blast ripped through the air. The immense impact of the explosion thudded against my face and chest, and I felt as though it tore through my insides, obliterating every nerve and every cell. All I could do was wait to be shattered into a million pieces. A bombshell exploded a few feet away from me, and a rain of shrapnel pelted my legs. I was incredibly fortunate to survive that day. I still have 7 tiny pieces of shrapnel in both of my legs. But you see, my physical wounds have healed, and my scars are now nearly invisible, translucent. But the deeper wounds, those that can never fully heal, are on a mental and emotional level. I came out of that day forever changed. I wrote and published my diary during the war, and in the entry describing that fateful day, I wrote, "Slowly, I've recovered, but I've also changed. I'm more frightened and worried and a lot older." I wrote that sentence when I was 13, and 2 decades later, I feel the same way. Months after I was wounded, when I was finally able to walk again, the first winter of the war was descending upon my city. Sarajevo was once an Olympic city. In 1984, we hosted very beautiful, very memorable Olympic Games. Yet now we were a city entirely besieged by tanks and weapons, a relentless noose of tanks depriving us of peace, freedom, dignity, and basic human needs like electricity, food, and water. Still, like a true Sarajevan, I looked forward to all the winter fun and games. Being wounded had definitely chipped away a large piece of my childhood, but somehow I had still preserved a tiny sliver of my innocence. So as the first snow blanketed the streets of my beloved city, I hoped that that would be the war's end. I hoped that the carnage would end because the snow would act as a soft, pillowy blanket absorbing the mortars and the bombshells. I honestly believed that every bomb would be rendered benign and completely useless. The first time I saw hot human blood scorch deep scarlet grooves in the fast melting snow, every childhood illusion, every tiny shard of innocence was shattered. And precisely because of this deep awareness of the fragility of our lives, my constant worry and hypervigilance, the way I've come to view life as a tiny pearl in the palm of my hand, I've often asked myself a question that poet Mary Oliver puts in such a beautiful, haunting way. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? For me, my life has been trying to live happily despite the wounds and painful memories, and despite the very intimate knowledge of human darkness. It has been about cultivating my belief and passion for peace and tolerance, and working for the very ideals that were shattered right in front of my face. In 1995, I was invited to come to America, live with a host family, learn English, and continue my education. However, in 1995, the war was still raging, and Sarajevo was still gasping for its every breath. But my persistent parents managed to smuggle me out of the city through the only route connecting Sarajevo with the rest of Europe, an underground tunnel. The tunnel was dug out during the second year of the war out of sheer necessity for supplies such as food, medicine, and oil. The government controlled the tunnel, as it was the only artery feeding the city, and it was also the only way out for those who were so severely wounded that they needed immediate medical assistance outside of our ravaged capital. Although the permits to get through the tunnel were terribly hard to come by, after numerous attempts, my parents managed to procure 2 of them. So the plan was that my mom would come with me through the tunnel and other dangerous parts of Bosnia and take me to Croatia, from where I was to fly to America. The tunnel started on the outskirts of Sarajevo. It went underneath the airport runway, some 15 feet under the ground, and then emerged again in a small town near the city. As Mom and I stepped into the tunnel, I looked ahead of me and immediately thought that it resembled a long, narrow tomb with its dead still walking and carrying heavy bags. The tunnel was about 5 feet tall, sometimes dipping even lower, which meant that I, at 5'7", had to drop my shoulders, hunch my back, and lower my head. Mud and underground water came to our ankles, and above our heads loomed heavy support beams and large oil pipes. The air was scarce, thick with the nauseating smell of oil, stale water, and sweat. This was the longest walk of my life. At some point, the wounds on my legs started hurting. My back started burning from being bent for so long and carrying all these bags. I couldn't breathe. I felt I was going to faint. As I looked ahead of me, there was just an unending, unrelenting darkness. And then there was a moment when this last drop overfilled the cup of my patience and my faith in this world. I felt too tired, too humiliated, and I decided to give up. I turned around with sticky tears on my face, and I looked at my mom. She was smaller than I was, and she was carrying even more bags. And before I could say anything, she looked at me and said, "Remember, Nadja, remember your dreams and keep walking." I turned around, I took one deep, nauseating breath, and sped up. And I made it through that darkness because of my mom. She and I survived many perils on our way to Croatia, but we made it in the end, and we said goodbye. She went all the way back to Sarajevo, and I came to America. I didn't speak much English. In fact, I mainly knew lines from Tom Cruise movies. They're not very useful. I'm sorry, but I also thought every man in America looked like Tom Cruise. That was a bit of a surprise. But honestly, I was greeted with so much kindness and love and generosity by my host family, my fellow high school students and teachers, and a couple of years later, by my Butler family. And they healed me. So many people in your country healed me. And in those years that I lived in America, I was so nurtured and supported that I've renewed my passion and belief in peace and tolerance. I became an author and speaker passionate to advocate for those who are most innocent, children, but who are also often voiceless. I found purpose in trying to educate others about my country, about the war in Bosnia, promoting peace and tolerance, and in the process, finding some personal healing and some grace. In my 34 years, I've learned many lessons in a very harsh way. Through my experiences, I've learned that life is powerful. It ruthlessly hammers and chisels our fates, and each one of us has an allotment of tunnels and challenges. But you see, for as much darkness as I have witnessed, I have also felt myself awash in the warmest light of the human spirit and of human kindness. The citizens of my besieged city of Sarajevo, people of all religious and ethnic backgrounds, they struggled through a common tragedy, and they came together stronger as one human family, sharing a loaf of bread. I personally, on an everyday basis, witness people's ingenuity, generosity, and kindness lighten and brighten the deepest darkness. And in people like my mom, I saw the power of an indomitable spirit that can persevere through almost anything. And I learned that although life is powerful, so are we. And with our grit and grace, we hold the hammer and the chisel as well. And we and our loved ones ultimately sculpt our fates. I lost my mom earlier this year. She slipped away quickly and suddenly, and left my family reeling from grief and sadness. But I've also spent many days and sleepless nights thinking about her legacy and all the things that she and my dad have taught me through their love and sacrifice. This has also made me take stock of my own life as well, making me think on what it means to live life well. In my opinion, there are many things that make for a full life. Successes and achievements have their important place, but for me, at the very core, at the very heart of human existence, are three things. To live life well is to find one's voice and one's purpose. It is also to love passionately and be loved by as many family and friends. And finally, it is to offer as much kindness to strangers and loved ones as one possibly can. As I learn and grow, I'm finding that for most of us, life isn't defined by some heroic acts or epic achievements, but by small, everyday gestures of love and kindness. And so our purpose isn't just about achieving our own goals and climbing the ladders of success, but it's also about lessening the burden and furthering the joy of our fellow travelers. And these small acts of great love fill us with peace and contentment, all the while in a very graceful, very quiet way, making a big and lasting difference in the lives of those we encounter on our way. So you see, in my opinion, peace and tolerance are being built by each and every one of us every single day. So, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I know you have been asked this question or a variation of it by many, especially as you graduate. And quite naturally, you might find it daunting, annoying even. But may I suggest, as someone who has heard death's carnivorous groans at the age of 12, that the mere fact that we have the breath to ask this question of others and of ourselves should flood our hearts with gratitude before anything else. As someone who has survived shackles of indignity and intolerance, I think we also ought to be immensely grateful for the freedom of choice to answer such a question in whichever way we choose. I have no doubt that you will reflect upon your life and ask this question often as you age. I have no doubt that you will find your own authentic, unique ways to answer it. Remember, life is powerful, but so are you. And if through it you can muster some grit, some kindness, and some grace, I think you will live life well. And finally, if I may ask you for a small kindness, one that will mean so much to me. You see, just like you have your loved ones with you today, I have some wonderful family and friends, my amazing host parents, my amazing husband, Chris, but also my father, who flew all the way from Bosnia for this occasion and who doesn't speak English. So if I may, I would just like to say something to my dad, thank him really, and tell him that he and my mom taught me so many valuable lessons. Tata, volim te, hvala ti što si došao i znaj da si mi ti, a i mama uvijek bili uzor plemenitog čovjeka. Hvala ti. Thank you all so much. Congratulations again, and remember your dreams and keep walking. Thank you.